Hi, I'm Matthew Pose with Audioholics, and I'm going to be recommending an inexpensive 2-channel system. It's going to cost well under $1,000, and it's going to be based on studio monitors, but it's actually going to be a really good and attractive system to use in your home environment. I hope you enjoy. Now, in the past, we've done videos on recommended systems such as the best home theater system you can buy for $1,500. And these types of videos are often very popular. And why? Well, it should be obvious. Who doesn't want to have good advice on what's the best way to spend your money, right? And well, we love to spend your money. In all seriousness though, I think it can be hard. There's just so many decisions out there, so many different products that are needed to make a good home theater system, and even a good 2-channel system work. And a lot of people don't have the luxury of being able to go out and try a lot of different components, so they don't necessarily know what are the best values out there. So I was thinking that it would be neat to put together a recommended 2-channel system using some offbeat components, things that we would recommend that you probably wouldn't have normally thought of. And to start with, we're going to use a pair of Kelly audio speakers. They're studio monitors. They're called the LP6, and they sell for $149 each, so $300 for the pair basically. Now you may be thinking to yourself, why would I want to use studio monitors in my home? Well, first off, while this isn't always true, a lot of times studio monitors are very accurate speakers. They're designed intentionally to be used in studios for the purposes of mixing, and you want the speaker to be as accurate as possible. And so often studio monitors are really built as a no-nonsense product. With home audio, it can be a little bit all over the place. The reality is sometimes we get a little bit romantic with our sound and we do things to speakers that aren't always in the best interest of good sound reproduction. And sometimes looks are more important than, maybe sound quality or parts quality is. In the case of the LP6, it's actually a powered speaker, so it doesn't need a receiver. And this is what's pretty neat about it. Using something like your laptop or some other sound source that's portable, you can hook directly into these powered speakers and use them as is. But I recognize that that's probably not the most reasonable thing. So I'm going to talk about some of the components you can use. Basically, using components that were designed for studios, you can actually put together a really high-end, high-quality 2-channel system in your home. So starting with that Kali Audio LP6, you want to use the XLR balanced inputs that it allows out to a balanced, what's called a studio monitor controller. Now these studio monitor controllers are basically passive volume controls, and then from there you want to go to your DA converter. Because we actually don't have a DA converter in this setup yet, and there's actually some really affordable ones available on Amazon from companies like SMSL. Now for the DA converter, we've chosen the SMSL SU8, which contains the ESS Sabre 9038 DA converter. Now that's a really high-end DA converter from that particular company that offers very low distortion, extremely low noise, and very wide dynamic range. It's probably one of the best top-performing DA converters on the market, and it's operated in what's called dual differential mode. So basically this is a fully balanced DA converter. Now the speakers that they're going into have balanced inputs, so the nice thing about that is you can use XLR balanced cables into them. And if nothing else, even if it doesn't really offer any audible performance benefit, although I think it might offer at least a small reduction in noise, the nice thing is that those cables tend to be pretty robust and the connectors are nice. But more important, this overall system is very high quality. You're using a really good DA converter into a really good speaker for really good performance. Now I mentioned earlier that it may be a good idea to use a passive volume control that's frequently sold for studio monitors, known as a studio monitor controller, with these. Now you can do that, and the nice thing about that is that it's typically an analog-based passive volume control. But the DA converter that I'm recommending actually has a digital volume control built in. It's a 32-bit volume control, and so while in the old days some of the digital volume controls actually caused a reduction in bit depth, which reduced sound quality, because this is a 32-bit volume control built into the DA chip itself, it's not necessarily critical that you bypass that or don't use it. You actually don't lose any of the necessary bit depth, because the music itself would only be up to 24 bits. So you've got basically that extra range that's built into the DAC itself to allow you to do this without any loss of resolution. So you can use that. It's a remote control, and so it's a pretty nice way of doing it. Or you could use the passive one, which we're going to recommend as well. It's not very expensive. I think $60, $70 for a passive volume control for these. Now, The speakers themselves, the DA converter, as I mentioned, is a very, very high quality DA converter. It's got all the features of a typical good high-end audiophile DA converter, but that's really not nearly as important as the quality of the speakers. And as I said, these are unusually good. And one of the things, though, that you may be concerned about is that if you look at the specs, it says 80 watts, or really 40 watts for the woofer and 40 watts for the tweeter for each one of these, and that probably doesn't seem like a lot of power. So you've got these relatively small bookshelf speakers with a 6-inch mid-bass, 1-inch dome tweeter, and a waveguide, and just 40 watts of power going to each of the drivers. How loud could they possibly play? Well, this is a good company. They've tested their products thoroughly, and they actually provide a lot of good information in that regard. And what they tell us is that this speaker will max out at 112 decibels. In fact, it'll produce 94 decibels at 1 meter with less than 3% distortion. Now, what does that mean for you as a listener? Well, that's really loud. You don't need to listen that loud. It means that the typical listening levels, which are still pretty loud, that you would be listening at the kind of continuous RMS level of music, or the average level of the music, is probably going to be about 85 decibels. And it means you're going to have well over 20 decibels of dynamic range built into the speaker, more than enough to handle any modern music you'd be listening to. And if you want to crank it up even louder and cause a little hearing damage in the process, these speakers have the room to do that. If you put them in a little bit larger room and you sit at a farther listening distance, getting closer to maybe 3 meters, they may struggle a little bit to hit the kind of maximum levels you're looking for, but you got to keep in mind, that would be true typically of most of the consumer-based 6.5-inch bookshelf speakers you'd be listening to as well. These things are going to play as loud or louder than anything in their size and price class that you would be able to get that isn't a studio monitor. In fact, I think they're going to play quite a bit louder. And they sound better. They have better measured performance and better overall sound quality than you're typically able to get out of most consumer speakers. So what I'm doing is I'm recommending to you some studio equipment that happens to be really good for use in a home consumer environment as well, and doesn't really look like typical studio equipment. It actually looks pretty nice. So this is a nice solid recommendation for a system where you're able to take advantage of the fact that there really isn't as much room in the studio environment for basically what I refer to as the audio nonsense that we sometimes have. These products are built well, designed right, and sound really good. Stick them on some inexpensive speaker stands, which we're going to recommend. Use some relatively inexpensive cables to connect everything together. And basically, you've got a really high resolution system for well under $1,000. In fact, I think we're going to be able to put this whole thing together for probably under $700. And that really is a steal when you consider what it is you're getting. So, in this episode, we basically talked about a very high-end 2-channel system at a very affordable price. And I hope some of you check this out and give it a shot. And until next time, keep listening.